Greetings, lore masters. Tonight, our chronicle covers a figure shrouded in ash and ancient arrogance, a man whose ambition was so colossal it literally tore a continent apart. We are turning our gaze towards Solstheim, but not the Solstheim you might know from a casual weekend visit to Raven Rock. We are looking back to a time before the ash settled, to the very dawn of the Merethic Era. Imagine standing on the wind-swept cliffs of the north, the air biting at your exposed skin while the shadow of a dragon passes overhead, blotting out the pale sun. It is a time of absolute tyranny, where silence is survival and a shout can kill. Let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes in this version of the Merethic Era without a decent set of enchanted netch leather and a severe supply of frost resistance potions. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Feel free to drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing who's up late with us, whether you're in the rainy streets of London or the humidity of Florida. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The story of the First Dragonborn does not begin with a hero's awakening in a cart bound for Helgen. It begins in the suffocating grip of the dragon cult. To understand Miraak, you have to understand the world that forged him. In the Merethic Era, dragons weren't just rare boss encounters you cheesed with a stealth archer build, they were gods. They were the undisputed rulers of Nirn, or at least the parts of it that mattered to the Nords. And the dragons, for all their power, were not interested in micromanaging the tax policies or grain shipments of the human cattle they ruled. They needed intermediaries. They needed the dragon priests. Miraak was one of these chosen few. Born on the island of Solstheim, he wasn't just some disgruntled mage who stumbled upon a forbidden book, at least not initially. He was high nobility, a powerful mage in a society where magical aptitude was the only currency that carried any real weight. The dragon cult was a brutal meritocracy. If you were weak, you were a labourer. If you were strong, you were a soldier. But if you were truly gifted, if you could channel magicka with a kind of precision that made the very air hum with static, you might be groomed for the priesthood. In these early days, Miraak would have been a terrifying figure to the common peasantry of Solstheim. Picture him clad in the raiment of his station, walking through the stone corridors of his temple. At this point in history, the temple that bears his name wasn't a ruin buried under millennia of volcanic ash and neglect. It was a magnificent, imposing structure, a testament to the might of the dragons he served. The walls would have been adorned with dragon head motifs, the braziers burning with magical fires that never consumed their fuel. He walked these halls not as a rebel, but as an enforcer. He was the hand of the Dover. When a dragon roared from the mountain peaks, it was Miraak's job to interpret that roar for the masses, usually translating it into bring more tribute or work harder on the monument. It is a well-established fact within the game's lore that the dragon priests were granted magical masks that augmented their powers. You have likely collected them yourself, Hevnorak, Croesus, Volsung. These weren't just fashion statements, they were conduits of authority. Miraak had his own mask, of course, but even then there was something different about him. While the other priests wore masks that mimicked the harsh, angular skeletal visages of the dragons or the Draugr, Miraak's mask, as we see it in the Fourth Era, has a strange, fluid quality to it, hinting at the tentacles of a seeker. However, back in the height of his service, before the corruption of Apocrypha fully took hold, he was likely the picture of loyal servitude. He wore the mask, and with it, he commanded the respect and fear of thousands. But beneath the mask, something was churning. This brings us to a fascinating element of the lore that often gets overlooked. Miraak was not just a priest, he was Dragonborn. But he didn't know it yet. Or perhaps he did, and he was hiding it. The existence of a Dragonborn at this point in history is a massive anomaly. The commonly accepted history, the one the Greybeards might tell you, is that Akatosh bestows the dragon blood upon mortals to stop the dragons or to save the world. Saint Alessia is often cited as the first recorded Dragonborn in Imperial history, but Miraak predates her by thousands of years. This creates a delicious bit of historical tension. Why did Akatosh grant the soul of a dragon to a high-ranking member of the dragon cult? It seems like a celestial clerical error. But consider the nature of dragons. They are driven by a singular concept: domination. Dova implies a will to power that cannot be suppressed. If Miraak possessed the soul of a dragon, he literally possessed an innate biological drive to dominate those around him. Serving as a middleman, bowing and scraping to Alduin or his lieutenants would have been physically painful for him. It went against the very metaphysical fabric of his soul. While his peers, priests like Veilok, were content to rule over men while serving dragons, Miraak likely felt a burning inadequacy in that arrangement. He was looking up at the dragons not with reverence, but with recognition. He saw them shouting, bending reality with their voices, and he didn't just feel awe, he felt a kinship. He felt that he could do it too, and that is a dangerous thought for a servant to have. Let's dive into a bit of obscure lore here. There are texts in the game, specifically the Guardian and the Traitor, which discuss the relationship between Miraak and another priest, Varlok. But what's less discussed is the daily administration of Solstheim under Miraak's rule before the rebellion. Archaeological evidence in the ruins of the dragon cult suggests that the priest held absolute power over life and death. They demanded a tribute of labour that broke the backs of the Nords. Miraak would have presided over sacrifices. He would have orchestrated the construction of word walls, those curved black monuments you find dotted across the map. Think about the irony of that. Miraak, the first Dragonborn, likely oversaw the carving of the very words of power that the last Dragonborn would later learn. He was literally building the infrastructure of the Thuum, ordering stonemasons to chisel fire, frost and force into obsidian, all while the dragons watched from their perches, unaware that their prize pupil was learning the lesson a little too well. He was surrounded by the voice. It was in the architecture, in the religious ceremonies, in the sky above him. There is a prevalent fan theory that circles the forums regarding the dragon priest hierarchy. We know there is a mask called Konarek, which translates roughly to warlord. This mask is obtained in the base game only by gathering all other masks. The theory posits that Konarek was not a specific person, but a title, a supreme commander of the dragon priests, a rank above all others, perhaps even a rank intended to challenge the dragons if necessary, or to lead the armies in times of great crisis. Some fans speculate that Miraak was being groomed for this position. His power was undeniable. His command of magic was superior to his peers. If the dragons needed a warlord to crush the budding rebellions of men, Miraak was the logical choice. This adds a layer of tragedy to his origins. He wasn't a scrappy underdog fighting the system. He was the system's golden child. He had everything a mortal in the Merethic Era could want: power, prestige, access to ancient magic, and the favour of the gods. But the dragon soul within him was a parasite of ambition. It demanded more. It demanded that he be the one receiving the tribute, not the courier delivering it. Imagine the solitude of that position. You're surrounded by cultists who chant your name, but you despise them for their weakness. You serve dragons who view you as a useful ant, but you know, deep in your marrow, that you are a dragon in a man's skin. The psychological pressure must have been immense. It was this pressure, this dissonance between his nature and his station, that created the cracks in his loyalty. The landscape of Solstheim reflected this harshness. In the days before the Red Mountain erupted and covered the southern half of the island in ash, Solstheim was much like Skyrim: snowy forests, icy glaciers, and bitter winds. Miraak's temple stood as a bastion against the cold. Inside, the air would be thick with incense and the metallic tang of blood. The chanting of the cultist would be a constant low-frequency drone, designed to keep the populace in a state of semi-hypnotic subservience. We also have to consider the dragon language itself. As a high priest, Miraak spoke the tongue of the Dova, Rotmalag. He conversed with dragons. This is a crucial detail. To speak the dragon language is to embrace their philosophy. There is no word for mercy in the dragon tongue that doesn't also imply weakness. There is no concept of service that doesn't imply slavery. By speaking their language every day, Miraak was programming his own mind to reject his servitude. Every time he spoke to a dragon, he was using words that asserted reality, and yet he was forced to use them to debase himself. The mask he wore, the heavy robes, the staff he carried, they were all symbols of his office, but they became chains. He began to look at the word walls not as holy scriptures to be guarded, but as weapons to be seized. The dragons, in their arrogance, never suspected that a mere mortal, even a powerful priest, could threaten them. They didn't understand that they had placed a wolf in charge of the sheep, and the wolf was beginning to realize he was bigger than the shepherd. As we move deeper into this chronicle, keep in mind that Miraak's fall, or rise depending on your perspective, was not an overnight event. It was a slow burn. It was years of resentment boiling under a mask of stone. It was the whisper of his own soul telling him, "You are Dragonborn. You answer to no one." And soon, another voice would join that internal chorus, a voice from the abyss of knowledge, offering him the key to unlock the shackles of the cult. But for now, he stands atop his temple, the cold wind whipping his robes, watching the dragons circle the peak of the mountain, his hand tightening around his staff, waiting for the moment to strike. The turning point did not come with a whisper, but with a roar. The Great Rebellion, as it would eventually be known in the scant scorched records of the time, was not a political maneuver. It was a butchery. Miraak had spent years, perhaps decades, curating his power, learning the syllables of the voice, and masking his growing strength beneath the guise of a loyal priest. But the Dragonborn soul is a volatile thing. It craves dominance, and eventually the pretense shattered. The catalyst for his betrayal remains a subject of debate among scholars of the Merethic Era. Some say he simply grew tired of kneeling. Others suggest he discovered a secret, a weakness in the dragon's armour, or a forbidden shout that tipped the scales. Whatever the spark, the fire that followed consumed everything. Miraak stopped translating the dragon's commands to the people. He stopped offering the tribute, and when the dragons descended to correct their unruly servant, they found that the servant had teeth. Imagine the scene at the Temple of Miraak. The cultists, confused and terrified, watching as their high priest stood his ground against a diving dragon. This wasn't a hero defending a village, this was a predator asserting territory. When the dragon opened its maw to unleash a torrent of fire, Miraak didn't cower behind a ward. He shouted back, "Yorsa Frul," Dragonrend. This is a critical point of divergence in the lore. The game tells us that the ancient Nord heroes, Gormleth, Hakon and Feldir, created the Dragonrend shout to force dragons to experience the concept of mortality, grounding them. But did they create it in a vacuum? Or did Miraak, with his forbidden knowledge, stumble upon the concept first? Or perhaps he didn't use Dragonrend at all? Perhaps his raw power, amplified by the forbidden knowledge he was already beginning to court, was enough to rip the soul from a dragon's chest. When the first dragon fell, crashing into the stone courtyard of the temple, the silence must have been deafening. Dragons did not die. They were eternal. And yet there lay a magnificent beast, its scales shattered, its eyes dimming. And then the horror truly began. Miraak did not just kill the dragon. He walked up to the dying god, and he consumed it. The visual of a mortal absorbing a dragon's soul is familiar to us players. The swirling energy, the dissolution of the dragon's flesh into a skeleton. But to the primitive Nords of Solstheim, witnessing this for the first time, it must have looked like the apocalypse. Their high priest was eating the soul of their god. The glowing energy flowed into Miraak, revitalizing him, expanding his consciousness, and confirming what he had suspected all along. He was the apex predator. This act was the ultimate blasphemy. The dragon cult was built on the premise of dragon supremacy. By devouring a soul, Miraak shattered the theological foundation of his entire society. He wasn't just a rebel, he was an apostate of the highest order. Word spread quickly. Other dragons, sensing the death of their kin, flocked to Solstheim. The sky turned dark with leathery wings. But Miraak was ready. He had turned the temple into a fortress. His most loyal followers, those who were more loyal to the man than the gods, stood with him. The temple grounds became a slaughterhouse. We aren't talking about one or two dragons. The skeletal remains scattered around the temple of Miraak in the Dragonborn. DLC suggests a massacre. He killed them by the dozens. It is a core in-game fact that you can find mounds of dragon bones around his temple. These aren't decorative. They are the leftovers of his feast. Each skeleton represents a dragon that thought it could discipline the priest, only to find itself on the menu. This period was a frenzy of violence. Miraak was drunk on power, his thuum growing stronger with every soul he absorbed. He wasn't just fighting for freedom, he was fighting for supremacy. He wanted to replace the dragons, not liberate the people. Here is an obscure lore tidbit for you. The Guardian and the Traitor text mentions that the dragon cult was already fracturing before the Dragon War officially kicked off in Skyrim. Miraak's rebellion on Solstheim was likely the first domino. While the Nords on the mainland were still suffering under Alduin's rule, wondering if gods could bleed, Miraak was already proving they could. If he had aligned with the Nord heroes, if he had joined Gormleth and the others, the Dragon War might have ended in a week. They actually sought him out, asking for his aid. And what did he do? He laughed at them. He told them their petty war was beneath him. He had his own designs. This refusal is crucial to understanding his character. He didn't care about saving humanity. He viewed the other rebels as insects. Why would a god ally with ants to kill other gods? He preferred to kill the gods himself and take their place. The community often debates just how many dragons Miraak killed during this period. The number must have been significant enough to draw the attention of the highest-ranking dragons. We aren't just talking about generic blood dragons or frost dragons. He likely slew named dragons, ancient beasts whose names are lost to history because Miraak devoured them so completely. But this slaughter came with a cost. The land of Solstheim began to suffer. The constant shouting, the magical fallout of dragon-on-dragonborn combat scarred the island. The earth shook. Storms raged unnaturally. The people were caught in the crossfire, dying in droves as collateral damage in a war between a tyrant and tyrants. Miraak's power grew, but so did his arrogance. He began to adorn his temple with the bones of his victims. He likely crafted armour and weapons from dragon bone long before it was a crafting skill tree option for players. Imagine him standing on a pile of dragon skulls, shouting challenges at the sky, daring Alduin himself to come down and face him. However, a rebellion of one, no matter how powerful, has limits. The dragons were numerous, and they were organising. They realised that Miraak was not just a rogue priest, but an existential threat. They couldn't just burn him out. They had to root him out. They began to lay siege to his temple. The skies rained fire day and night. The stone walls of the temple, strong as they were, began to crack. Miraak found himself cornered. He had the power of the voice. He had the souls of dragons fueling his veins, but he was losing ground. The sheer attrition was wearing him down. His followers were dying. His resources were dwindling. He needed an edge. He needed something more than just the Thu'um. He needed knowledge that the dragons didn't possess. And that is when the whispers started. Not the roar of dragons, but the slippery, wet whispers of something far older and far more dangerous. As the fires of the dragon siege burned outside his walls, Miraak turned his gaze inward, and then outward, to the plains beyond Nirn. He began to look for a patron who appreciated ambition, a patron who hoarded secrets like a dragon hoarded gold. The desperation of the siege pushed him toward the forbidden. He likely spent his nights in the deepest chambers of the temple, poring over tomes that even the dragon cult had banned. He was searching for a weapon, a spell, a truth that could turn the tide. He was a drowning man looking for a lifeline, and he didn't care if the hand that reached out to save him was covered in eyes and tentacles. The Great Rebellion was failing. Miraak had proven that dragons could die, but he was also proving that a Dragonborn, for all his power, was still mortal. He was bleeding, he was tired, and he was angry. The glorious revolution was turning into a last stand. But Miraak was not the type to die a martyr. If this world wouldn't submit to him, he would find the power to break it. And so, as the dragons battered down the gates of his fortress, Miraak opened a door of his own. The siege of the dragon cult temple was a cacophony of breaking stone and roaring fire, but deep within the inner sanctum the world had gone unnervingly quiet. Miraak stood at the precipice of defeat. The dragons were dismantling his defences brick by brick, and his rebellion, glorious and bloody as it was, faced imminent extinction. But as any seasoned adventurer knows, when one door closes, a Daedric prince usually opens a window, and that window is almost always covered in slime and demands a heavy toll. Enter Hermaeus Mora, the demon of knowledge, the gardener of men, the prince of fate. In the pantheon of Skyrim's deities, Mora is unique. He doesn't want your soul for torture like Molag Bal, nor does he want to spread disease like Periite. He wants to hoard you. He wants your memories, your secrets, and your potential stored away in his infinite library like a rare first edition comic book that's never allowed to be taken out of its plastic sleeve. It is here in the flickering torchlight of his besieged temple, that Miraak made contact. We can imagine the scene, the exhausted priest smelling of ozone and dragon blood, turning to the forbidden texts he had likely ignored in his youth. He summoned the prince not out of reverence, but out of necessity. And Mora, who had likely been watching this fascinating little ant defy the dragons for years, was all too happy to answer. The manifestation of Hermaeus Mora is always a visceral experience in the game, that shifting amorphous mass of eyes and tentacles, accompanied by a voice that sounds like it's struggling to speak through a mouthful of molasses. But to Miraak, in that desperate hour, Mora didn't look like a monster. He looked like salvation. The prince offered him a deal. He would grant Miraak the power not just to kill dragons, but to enslave them. He would teach him the words of power that the dragons had kept hidden, shouts that could bend the very will of creation. This brings us to a core in-game fact. The Bend Will shout, Gol Hardov, is Miraak's signature move. It is the magic that allows him to turn dragons into mounts and stones into servants. This shout is not natural. It is not part of the way of the voice taught by the Greybeards. It feels wrong, it's intrusive, a violation of the target's mind. It is pure Apocrypha. It is highly probable that this specific shout was the carrot Mora dangled in front of Miraak. You wish to dominate? The prince might have whispered. I will show you how to dominate their very minds. For a man driven by the dragon soul urge to rule, this was irresistible. Killing a dragon is a display of strength. Enslaving a dragon is a display of absolute authority. Miraak accepted. He opened the Black Book, likely the very same. Waking Dreams book we encounter millennia later, and the ink of Apocrypha began to stain his soul. There is a fantastic, obscure bit of lore regarding the nature of Hermaeus Mora's dealings with the Nords. Ancient Nordic texts refer to him as the Woodland Man, a trickster spirit who would lure unsuspecting Nords into the forest with promises of knowledge, only to trap them forever. Miraak, despite his intelligence, fell for the oldest trick in the book. He believed he was the exception. This is the classic hubris of the powerful mage. He looked at the mass of tentacles and eyes and thought, I can handle this. I can use this entity to win my war, and then I will discard him. He didn't realize that you don't use Hermaeus Mora. Mora uses you. The Prince of Knowledge doesn't give gifts, he makes investments, and he expects a return. The community has long debated the exact nature of this seduction. Was it instant? Did Miraak sign his life away in a single ritual, or was it a slow corruption? A popular fan theory suggests that Mora had been influencing Miraak since childhood. Perhaps those voices he heard, the intuition that led him to question the dragons, were planted by Mora all along. The theory posits that Mora specifically groomed Miraak to be the ultimate weapon against the dragons, not because Mora cared about human freedom, but because dragons are hoarders of knowledge in their own right. Dragons know words of power, history, and secrets of time. By creating a Dragonborn who could devour dragons, Mora was essentially creating a vacuum cleaner to suck up all that distinct dragon knowledge and deposit it into his own realm. Miraak was just the vessel. As the pact was sealed, the atmosphere in the temple would have shifted. The air would have grown heavy, smelling of old paper and salt water, the scent of Apocrypha. The panic of the siege outside would have seemed distant to Miraak, muffled by the presence of the Daedra. He was no longer just a dragon priest. He was the first Dragonborn, champion of the Prince of Fate. The physical toll of this pact was immediate. In the game, we see the Seekers and Lurkers of Apocrypha, twisted, eldritch, horrors. Miraak didn't turn into one of them, but his aesthetic shifted. His sword, his staff, his mask, they all took on the tentacled, organic look of Mora's realm. The sword acts like a whip, lashing out with green energy. The staff sprays the writhing tentacles of the darker planes. These weren't just tools he found, they were manifestations of his new allegiance. He was arming himself with the substance of a nightmare. This moment of seduction is tragic because it represents the final loss of Miraak's humanity. Before this, he was a rebel fighting tyrants. After this, he was a tyrant in training, trading one master for another, though he was too blind to see the leash around his neck. He traded the fire of the dragons for the ink of the abyss. And let's be honest, we've all been there. You're playing an RPG, you see a dialogue option that promises forbidden power, and you click it immediately. Who cares about the consequences? I need that damage buff. Miraak was the ultimate min-maxer. He saw a stat boost that would let him crush the server, and he took it, ignoring the terms of service that clearly stated, "Soul becomes property of Hermaeus Mora, eternity in a library of madness guaranteed." The knowledge flooded into him. He learned that reality is malleable. He learned that the dragons, for all their strength, were creatures of the material world, bound by certain laws. Mora taught him how to step outside those laws. He learned to become ethereal, to step between dimensions, to use the whirlwind sprint not just to move fast but to tear through space. Crucially, this alliance changed the stakes of the war on Solstheim. The dragons outside were no longer fighting a rogue priest, they were fighting a Daedric champion. The energy radiating from the temple would have changed from the warm heat of fire magic to the cold, nauseating, sickly green of oblivion. The dragons, sensitive to magic, would have felt this shift. They would have realised that their wayward servant had done the unthinkable. He had invited the void into their domain, but the most chilling aspect of this seduction is the silence of it. While the battle raged outside, the real defeat happened in a quiet room, with the stroke of a pen, or rather, the opening of a book. Miraak surrendered his destiny to the Prince of Fate. He thought he was acquiring the means to rule Solstheim, but he was actually becoming a prisoner of a realm that didn't even exist on the map. As the section closes, picture Miraak standing up from the black book. His eyes, behind the mask, are different now. They have seen the infinite library. He's calm. The shaking of the walls doesn't bother him. He walks to the balcony of his temple, the green energy of Apocrypha wreathing his hands, ready to test his new toys. The dragons outside roar, expecting fear. Instead, they get a whisper that claws at their minds. The seduction is complete, the trap is sprung, and the world is about to break. The deal was struck. The ink was dry, and Miraak stepped out onto the balcony of his temple, not as a desperate rebel, but as a demigod fueled by forbidden knowledge. But the dragons had not come alone. They had brought their own champion, a priest whose loyalty was as unbreakable as the Stalrim of the north. His name was Varlock. Varlock the Jailer. In the game, you might know him as a high-level dragon priest boss encountered in the quest Lost Legacy. But in the Merethic Era, he was the immovable object to Miraak's unstoppable force. The dragons, sensing the corruption radiating from Miraak, entrusted Varlock with a singular task: destroy the traitor. They didn't just want Miraak dead, they wanted him erased. The duel that followed is not just a footnote in history, it is a geological event. We are talking about a battle so catastrophic, so saturated with high-level destruction magic and Thu'um, that it fundamentally altered the map of Tamriel. According to the lore, specifically the legends told by the Skal people, Solstheim was not always an island. It was once part of the mainland of Skyrim, a peninsula jutting out into the Ghost Sea. The battle between Miraak and Varlock lasted for days. Imagine two masters of the voice, two pinnacles of magical achievement, unleashing everything they had. They shouted mountains apart, they rained meteors and lightning with such intensity that the land itself gave up. The Battle of the Summit, as some fans call it, was a clash of ideologies. Varlock represented order, the rigid, brutal hierarchy of the dragon cult. Miraak represented chaos, the selfish, consuming ambition of the individual. When these two forces collided, the tectonic plates groaned. The sheer scale of this is hard to visualize in the game engine, where a dragon fight usually just messes up the physics of a mammoth nearby. But in the lore, this was anime-level destruction. The Thu'um is tonal architecture, it sings reality into new shapes. When Miraak and Varlock shouted at each other, they were essentially rewriting the code of the physical world in real time, and the code couldn't handle the conflicting inputs. The land cracked, the sea rushed in, core in-game fact. The separation of Solstheim from Skyrim is directly attributed to this duel in the mythology of the island. The Skal tell stories of the traitor and the guardian fighting until the earth was sundered. This isn't just a poetic metaphor, it is an explanation for why you have to take a boat from Windhelm to get there. They shouted a landmass into existence. During the fight, Varlock proved to be Miraak's equal, perhaps even his superior in raw discipline. While Miraak flung wild, Daedric-infused magic, Varlock countered with the precise, practiced power of the dragons. Varlock didn't have the fancy tentacles or the green glow, he had the backing of the ruling gods of the world. He was the establishment coming down with the full weight of the law. Fan theories often discuss why Varlock was able to match a Dragonborn. Miraak had a dragon soul, Varlock did not. By all rights, Miraak should have steamrolled him. But Varlock's title, the Jailer, implies a specific skill set. Perhaps Varlock was granted power by the dragon specifically designed to counter other magic users. Or perhaps Miraak's newfound power from Hermaeus Mora was unstable, erratic, while Varlock's was refined. The duel raged across the landscape. Forests were incinerated, glaciers were shattered, the very air burned. And slowly, inexorably, Varlock began to win. Miraak, for all his boasted power, for all his secret deals with Daedric princes, was being pushed back. The dragons circled overhead, watching their champion dismantle the traitor. This moment is critical for Miraak's character arc. He had sold his soul for power, and it still wasn't enough. He was losing. The humiliation must have been searing. Here he was, the first Dragonborn, the Chosen, of Hermaeus Mora, getting beaten by a bureaucrat of the dragon cult. It was a reality check of cosmic proportions. As the battle reached its climax, the ground beneath them literally gave way. The great severance occurred. The peninsula shattered, and the sea poured into the gap, creating the island of Solstheim. Amidst this cataclysm, Miraak was defeated. Varlock had him dead to rights. The traitor was broken, his magicka exhausted, his shouts reduced to rasps. But Varlock made a mistake, or perhaps he simply couldn't fight destiny. Just as Varlock prepared to deliver the killing blow, likely a shout that would have obliterated Miraak entirely, intervention arrived, not from the dragons, but from the shadows. Hermaeus Mora does not like to lose his investments. He had paid for a champion, and he intended to keep him. Before Varlock could strike, the realm of Apocrypha reached out. The black books opened. Tentacles of shadow and ink erupted from the void, wrapping around the battered form of Miraak. To Varlock and the dragons, it must have looked like Miraak was being dragged to hell. In a way, he was. He wasn't dying, he was being extracted. Mora snatched him from the jaws of defeat, pulling him out of Mundus and into oblivion. Varlock was left standing on the edge of the newly formed island, victorious but empty-handed. He had saved the dragon cult's authority, but the traitor had escaped justice. The dragons, recognizing Varlock's service, named him the ruler of the island and tasked him with a vigil. He was to watch for Miraak's return. Even in death, Varlock remained the Jailer. He was buried in a tomb that was sealed with magical locks, waiting to stop Miraak should he ever try to come back. This sets up the entire conflict of the Dragonborn DLC. Miraak isn't just some random villain, he is an escaped convict, and Varlock is the warden who has been waiting thousands of years for the jailbreak. The duel that split the land was just round one. For the people of the time, the disappearance of Miraak was likely terrifying. One moment he was destroying the world, the next he was gone, swallowed by the dark. The Nords were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered land. The dragon cult reasserted control, but the scar remained. Solstheim was now an island, a permanent monument to the destructive potential of the voice. It's a sobering thought. We wander around Skyrim shouting at goats and bandits, rarely thinking about the tectonic implications of our power. But Miraak and Varlock showed us the ceiling. They showed us that two people shouting loud enough can redraw the atlas. As the dust settled and the sea foam calmed around the new coastline of Solstheim, silence returned to the north. But it was an uneasy silence. Varlock began his eternal watch. The dragons returned to their mountaintops, perhaps a little more wary of their servants. And Miraak? Miraak was falling through the cracks of reality, away from the snow and the wind, and into a place where the skies are sickly green and the ocean is made of ink. The duel was over, but his imprisonment had just begun. The sensation of travelling between planes of existence is not like walking through a door. It is like being unmade and then knitted back together by a blind weaver. One moment, Miraak was falling through the shattered crust of Solstheim, the roar of Varlock's triumph ringing in his ears, the salt spray of the ghost sea stinging his wounds. The next, the world inverted. The cold, biting wind of the north vanished, replaced by a humid, suffocating stillness that smelled of ozone, stagnant water, and the dust of a billion unread pages. He had escaped death, yes, but as his boots hit the strange, shifting surface of his new sanctuary, Miraak must have realised that sanctuary was a generous term. He had arrived in Apocrypha. To the uninitiated, or the player stepping into a black book for the first time, Apocrypha is an assault on the senses. The sky is not blue or black, it is a bruised, sickly green, swirling with nebulous clouds that seem to form faces before dissolving into mist. There is no sun, yet there is light. A sourceless, pervasive glow that casts no true shadows, only murky gradients of gloom, and the ocean. It is not water, it is ink, thick, black, viscous ink that slaps lazily against the shores of islands made entirely of books. Miraak, the First Dragonborn, the man who had torn a continent apart, was now a refugee in the library of the grotesque. He stood up, steadying himself on a stack of leather-bound tomes that served as a retaining wall. His body was broken from the duel with Varlock. His magicka reserves were dry. He was vulnerable in a way he hadn't been since he was a child, and he was entirely alone. Well, not entirely. The inhabitants of Apocrypha are not welcoming committees. Floating silently through the corridors of stacked books were the Seekers. We know them well, robed, floating entities with tentacles for faces, constantly reading from invisible texts. In the game, they hit you with knowledge-draining spells that sap your magicka. To Miraak, seeing them for the first time, they must have looked like a parody of the priesthood he had just left. They were scholars without eyes, priests without a god, drifting in an eternal cycle of consumption. And then there were the lurkers, hulking amphibious monstrosities that rose from the ink pools like primordial nightmares. They are the brutes of Mora's realm, the enforcers. When Miraak first arrived, did they attack him? Or did they sense the mark of their master on him? It is a chilling thought. Miraak, the proud sorcerer, having to walk past these horrors, unsure if he was their guest or their lunch. This transition represents a massive shift in Miraak's reality. In Mundus, he was a big fish in a small pond. In Oblivion, he was a speck of dust in an infinite archive. The sheer scale of Apocrypha is designed to make mortals feel insignificant. The towers of books spiral up into the green void, endless and impossible. Bridges made of floating paper connect the spires. The geometry is non-Euclidean. Paths twist back on themselves, up becomes down, and the horizon is a lie. Hermaeus Mora did not appear immediately to congratulate him. The Prince of Fate is not a chatty host. He left Miraak to wander. This was likely the first test of his imprisonment. Miraak had to navigate the labyrinth. He had to learn the physics of this new world. He had to realise that here, willpower and knowledge were more physical than muscle and bone. Let's touch on a core in-game fact here. The black books act as portals. In the game, reading one pulls you into a specific chapter of Apocrypha. Miraak didn't just enter one book, he entered the hub. He was inside the source code of the library. He quickly learned that the books were not just furniture. They were the ground he walked on, the walls that sheltered him. The very infrastructure of his existence was now composed of information. Forbidden, dangerous, discarded information. There is a fascinating, obscure lore detail about the contents of Apocrypha. It is said to contain all knowledge that ever was and all that ever will be, but specifically knowledge that is forbidden or forgotten. The failed drafts of history, the spells that were too dangerous to write down, the secrets that drive men mad. Miraak was now breathing this air. Every breath was a microdose of insanity. For a man obsessed with power, this was paradise, and a hell wrapped in one. He was surrounded by the very things he craved, but he was trapped. It's like locking a starving man in a grocery store but telling him he can never leave the aisles. Fans often debate the nature of Miraak's physical form in Apocrypha. Did he age? Time in Oblivion is not linear. It flows differently, sometimes looping, sometimes stopping. When we meet Miraak in the Fourth Era, thousands of years have passed in Tamriel, but he seems spry, energetic, even impatient. He hasn't withered. This suggests that Apocrypha acts as a preservative. He was pickled in knowledge. He became a fixture of the realm, as timeless as the books themselves. But that preservation came at a cost. His connection to the mortal plane was severed. He could no longer feel the wind of Solstheim or hear the prayers of his cultists. He was cut off. For a control freak like Miraak, this isolation must have been torture. He had traded a cage of stone for a cage of infinite space. As he explored his new domain, Miraak would have begun to secure a base of operations. He likely cleared out a section of the library, driving back the Seekers and asserting his dominance. Even here, stripped of his armies, he was still Dragonborn. He could shout. And in Apocrypha, the voice has a unique resonance. The realm responds to will. When Miraak shouted, "Fust, ye, the books didn't just fly," the reality of the realm shuddered. He realized he could shape this place. Not much, but enough to build a sanctuary. This brings us to the visual design of his summit that we see later. It is a structure built of the realm's materials but ordered by a human mind. It has altars, crafting stations, a dragon skeletal trophy. It shows that Miraak refused to just be a resident. He insisted on being a ruler, even if he was only ruling a pile of damp paper. But the most terrifying aspect of his escape was the realization of what Hermaeus Mora actually wanted. Mora didn't save Miraak because he liked him. He saved him because Miraak was a unique specimen. A Dragonborn is a creature of Akatosh, a shard of the time god. By trapping Miraak in Apocrypha, Mora had essentially captured a piece of a rival deity. He had a living, breathing paradox in his collection. Miraak was the ultimate rare edition. He was placed on the shelf to be taken down and played with whenever Mora felt the urge. The Demon of Knowledge now had a window into the soul of a dragon, something he could study for eternity. As the adrenaline of the escape faded, the silence of the library pressed in. The only sound was the rustle of pages turning by themselves in the windless air and the wet slap of the ink sea. Miraak the Conqueror sat on a throne of books, safe from Varlock, safe from the dragons, but utterly trapped in the belly of the beast. He had escaped into the ink, but the ink stains everything it touches. And as he looked at his hands, perhaps he saw the first signs of the green corruption beginning to take hold, the first subtle shift that would eventually turn his robes, his magic, and his mind into an extension of the realm itself. He was alive. But in Apocrypha, alive is a relative term. He was now a character in a story that Hermaeus Mora was writing, and the Prince of Fate is known for his tragic endings. Time in Oblivion is a liar. In the mortal realm of Mundus, time is a straight line drawn by Akatosh, moving from the dawn of the Merethic Era to the Fourth Era with reliable ticking precision. You grow old, you die, history moves on. But in Apocrypha, time is a puddle. It pools, it evaporates, it rains back down in the wrong order. For Miraak, the thousands of years that passed in Tamriel might have felt like an eternity, or they might have felt like a long, feverish afternoon. We are entering the period of the Great Stagnation. This is the part of the villain's backstory that usually gets skipped in the montage. We see the defeat, and then we cut to the return. But we need to sit in this middle chapter, because this is where Miraak truly lost whatever was left of his humanity. Imagine spending 4,000 years in a library where the books scream when you open them. The isolation of Apocrypha is total. There is no day or night cycle to mark the passage of time, there is only the green glow. Miraak sat on the summit of his twisted tower, watching the ink tides rise and fall for millennia. This kind of sensory deprivation, or rather sensory monotony, would break a normal mind within a year. It's the white room torture method, but coloured exclusively in shades of toxic sludge. But Miraak didn't break, he calcified. His arrogance, which was already formidable, hardened into a diamond-like core of entitlement. He didn't spend these millennia weeping for his lost Solstheim. He spent them fuming. He spent them planning. He replayed his duel with Varlock in his mind 1,000,000 times, analysing every mistake, every missed beat of the Thuum. He wasn't repenting, he was optimising. It is a well-established in-game fact that reading a black book can grant you immense power, but prolonged exposure to the realm of Apocrypha drives mortals insane. We see the ghosts of other adventurers who wandered in, paranoid, muttering, hostile. They lost themselves. Miraak, however, is unique. He read all the black books. He didn't just read them, he mastered them. He slept on a pile of them, and he remained lucid. Well, lucid is a subjective term. He kept his identity, yes. He remembered who he was, the First Dragonborn. But his perspective warped. After staring into the infinite abyss of knowledge for thousands of years, the petty squabbles of Tamriel, empires rising and falling, the Oblivion Crisis, the Great War, must have seemed like ant colonies fighting over a crumb. His ambition shifted from rule Solstheim to rule destiny. This stagnation also defined his relationship with Hermaeus Mora. You might think they would have become buddies after all that time, roommates in the void. But the lore suggests a much colder dynamic. Mora was not a friend, he was a zookeeper. He would occasionally drift by, a mass of eyes and tentacles, to drop a new piece of forbidden knowledge into Miraak's lap, just to see what the monkey would do with it. Here is a shout that boils the blood in a man's veins, Mora might whisper. Learn it. And Miraak, having nothing else to do, would learn it. He became Mora's favourite experiment. But deep down, Miraak knew he was a prisoner. The Prince of Fate is possessive. He doesn't share his toys. Miraak realised that Mora had no intention of ever letting him leave. He was a trophy on a shelf meant to gather dust and look impressive for eternity. This realisation likely fueled a deep, cold hatred for the Daedric Prince. Miraak hated serving dragons because they were arrogant. Serving Mora was worse because Mora was indifferent. Let's look at an obscure lore tidbit regarding the mechanics of Oblivion. There is a concept known as chaotic creatia, the raw stuff of Oblivion that Daedra are made of. Mortals who spend too long in these realms begin to absorb this creatia. They become vestiges of a sort. While Miraak didn't become a Daedra, his physiology fundamentally changed. He no longer needed to eat or sleep in the traditional sense. He was sustained by the magic of the realm. This explains why he's still in his prime when we meet him. He has been mummified by magic. However, there is a catch, a common trope in Elder Scrolls lore. If a mortal who has been sustained by oblivion for millennia were to suddenly step back into Mundus without preparation, the weight of all those years might crash down on them instantly. They could turn to dust. This is a terrifying constraint. Miraak wasn't just trapped by Mora's will. He was trapped by biology. To return to Solstheim, he would need to find a way to anchor his soul to the mortal plane again, to bypass the crushing weight of time. He couldn't just walk out the door. He had to essentially be reborn. The community has a fascinating debate about what Miraak was doing during major historical events. When Alduin was cast forward in time, did Miraak know? When Tiber Septim shouted his way to an empire, did Miraak feel a disturbance in the voice? The prevailing theory is that Apocrypha acts as a one-way mirror. Miraak could see the ripples of these events through the scrying pools of Mora's library, but he couldn't touch them. Imagine the frustration. Watching lesser men, false dragonborns claiming glory that belonged to him. Watching the Septim dynasty rise, knowing that their dragon blood was a diluted political gift, while his was the raw primal article. It must have been maddening. Every era that passed without his name being spoken was an insult. I am the first, he would whisper to the silent stacks of books, and they have forgotten me. This resentment is what kept him sharp. He didn't succumb to the madness of the Seekers because he had a goal. He wasn't just passing time, he was building a masterpiece of a plan. He began to experiment with the Seekers. He learned to command them. He bent the will of the Lurkers. He turned his prison into a training ground. We also have to consider the visual evolution of his gear during this time. The mask he wears, originally a symbol of the dragon cult, became fused with the aesthetic of Apocrypha. The robes he wears in the game are tattered, stained with the green residue of the realm and embroidered with tentacle motifs. He didn't just wear the clothes, he became the brand. He adapted to his environment so completely that he looked less like a Nord and more like a humanoid extension of Hermaeus Mora. There were likely moments of despair, moments where he stood at the edge of his platform, looking down into the endless sea of ink, and considered jumping, just letting the abyss swallow him, ending the boredom. But the dragon soul within him wouldn't allow it. Dragons do not commit suicide, they dominate. If he couldn't dominate Tamriel, he would dominate his own despair. He began to craft his magnum opus, the plan to return. He realised that he couldn't fight his way out, physically. Mora was the realm itself. He needed a back door. He needed a connection to Solstheim that Mora couldn't sever. He needed faith. The stones of Solstheim, the earth stones, the beast stone, the wind stone. He remembered them from his time as a priest. They were conduits of power deep in the earth of the island. If he could corrupt them, if he could turn them into antennas, he could project his will across the void. He could bypass the physical barriers of oblivion by hitchhiking on the minds of the people who lived there. This was the birth of his return strategy. It took him centuries to refine the shout. He had to modify the bend will shout to work across dimensions. He had to tweak the frequencies, adjust the tonal architecture so it could pierce the veil between worlds. It was like tuning a radio to a station that didn't exist yet. So, the Great Stagnation wasn't wasted time. It was a gestation period. Miraak was the chrysalis, inside the hard shell of his prison. The man was dissolving and something else was forming. A being of pure will, fueled by 4,000 years of boredom and spite. He wasn't just a dragon priest anymore, he was a cosmic horror in the making. The section ends with Miraak finally finding the frequency. He is standing at his altar, his hands hovering over a black book. He whispers a word, not a loud shout, just a whisper. And millions of miles away, across the barriers of reality, on the island of Solstheim, a single stone begins to hum. A worker in the mines of Raven Rock pauses, a strange headache forming behind his eyes. The connection is made. The stagnation is over. The dreamer is waking up, and he is dragging the world into his nightmare. If you spend 4,000 years in a library, you eventually stop reading the books and start rewriting them. Miraak wasn't content to simply learn the existing shouts of the Dova. Yoltor Shul, fire breath, is useful for barbecue, and Fusrodar is great for clearing a crowded hallway, but they are crude instruments. They destroy matter. Miraak wanted something that could destroy resistance. He wanted a shout that didn't break bones but broke the very concept of no. This brings us to the most terrifying weapon in his arsenal, and arguably the most disturbing mechanic in the entire Elder Scrolls series, the Bend Will Shout. In the dragon language, it is Golhardov, Earth, Mind, Dragon. Let's break down that progression because it reveals the terrifying scale of Miraak's ambition. This wasn't just a spell he picked up at the College of Winterhold, it was a systematic dismantling of the hierarchy of creation. The first word, Gaul, Earth, is the anchor. In the game, when you learn this word, it allows you to cleanse the Allmaker stones. But for Miraak, developing this word was about dominance over the physical land itself. Remember, he is a Dragonborn. His soul resonates with the bones of the earth. By shouting Gaul, he wasn't just talking to the rocks. He was enslaving the geology of Solstheim. He was telling the island, "You belong to me." This is why his corruption spreads through the stones first. He needed the land to be his amplifier before he could reach the people. The second word, mind, is where it gets personal. This is the frequency that bleeds into the brains of mortals. It is an intrusive psionic drill. It bypasses logic, loyalty, and fear. It rewrites the victim's narrative. When Miraak shouts, "Ha!" he isn't persuading you. He is editing your source code. You don't serve him because you're scared. You serve him because your brain suddenly decides that serving him is the only thing that matters. It's the ultimate gaslight. And then the final word, Dov, dragon. This is the masterstroke. Dragons are timeless, immortal shards of time driven by an unshakable will to dominate. To bend the will of a dragon is metaphysically impossible, or it should be. A dragon's will is its power. For Miraak to develop a shout that forces a dragon to kneel to turn a god into a taxi service is an act of supreme blasphemy against Akatosh. It proves that his power had eclipsed the boundaries of the natural world. He had cracked the encryption of the dragon soul. A core in-game fact that players often gloss over is the cooldown and the implication of this shout. When you use Bend Will on a dragon in Skyrim, the dragon doesn't just stop fighting. It lands and offers its neck. It calls you Thuri, Overlord. It's not just stunned, it is humiliated. The dragon Saratar, whom we'll discuss later, speaks to Miraak with a grovelling reverence that is painful to watch. This shout strips away the dignity of an apex predator and leaves a whimpering pet. Now, let's consider the obscure lore implications of tonal architecture. In the Elder Scrolls universe, reality is a song. The Dwemer tried to manipulate the tones with machines. The Greybeards tried to harmonise with it. Miraak, he created a discordant note. Bend Will is essentially a virus in the Song of Creation. It forces the universe to sing his tune. There is a disturbing fan theory that connects bend will to the concept of anti-chim. Chim is the state of realizing you are part of a dream but asserting your individuality anyway. I am. Bend will seems to impose the opposite. You are not. It forces the subject to lose their individuality and become an extension of the shouter. It's a negation of the self. By shouting this, Miraak is essentially acting as a black hole of ego, sucking everything around him into his own orbit until nothing else exists but him. Developing this shout in the isolation of Apocrypha must have been a gruesome process. How do you test a mind control shout when you're alone? You test it on the locals. Picture Miraak stalking the twisted, paper-strewn bridges of Apocrypha. He spots a seeker floating nearby. He takes a breath, channeling the green, sickly magicka of the realm, and whispers the words. The seeker freezes. Its tentacles stop writhing. It turns to him, not with hostility, but with absolute submission. Then he tries it on a lurker, a creature of pure rage. The beast calms, bowing its massive slimy head. But he needed more. He needed to project this power across the barrier of oblivion. This is where the mechanics of the shout get truly eldritch. He realized that if he could embed the shout into the stones of Solstheim, like recording a song onto a vinyl record, the stones would play the shout on a loop, forever. The chant we hear the mind-controlled people reciting in the game is not random gibberish. Here in his shrine that they have forgotten, here do we toil that we might remember. This chant is a verbal component of the bend will spell. The people are literally shouting themselves into slavery. Miraak outsourced the casting of the spell to the victims themselves. It's a self-perpetuating cycle of enslavement. This weaponization of the voice is a stark contrast to the way of the voice taught by Jurgen Windcaller. The Greybeards teach that the voice is for worship and contemplation. Miraak looked at the voice and saw a leash. He didn't care about the philosophy, he cared about the utility. It's dark stuff, friends. In most fantasy games, mind control is a status effect that wears off in 3 turns. Here, it's a geological cancer. It affects the trees, the rocks, the animals, and the people. When you arrive on Solstheim in the DLC, the very air feels heavy with it. You can see the green aura around the stones. That is the visual representation of Miraak's will, pressing down on the world, like a heavy blanket. And let's be honest, if we had a shout that could make anyone agree with us, we'd probably abuse it too. Project manager, accept this deadline extension. Barista, give me the coffee for free. Gol Hardov. But Miraak wasn't looking for free coffee. He was looking for an army that didn't need to be paid, fed, or motivated. He wanted an army that didn't even know it was an army. As he perfected the 3rd word, Dov, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. He looked up at the green sky of Apocrypha, where Hermaeus Mora was watching. Miraak smiled behind his mask. He had created a key that could unlock any door, even the door to a dragon's mind. He was no longer just a prisoner. He was the warden of a new prison, one that he was about to expand until it covered the entire island of Solstheim. The shout was ready. The stones were waiting. The stage was set for the quietest invasion in history. No explosions, no marching boots, just a whisper, carried on the wind, telling everyone on the island that it was time to wake up and build a temple for the return of the true king. The sun dips below the ash-choked horizon of Solstheim, casting long, bruised shadows across the fungal forests and the basalt cliffs. In Raven Rock, the Redoran guards stifle yawns, looking forward to a mug of sujamma and a warm bed. In the Skull village, the shamans bank the fires, preparing for the quiet of the northern night. But as the moons rise, a strange phenomenon takes hold. The people do not go to sleep. Or rather, their bodies do not go to sleep. Their minds drift away into a green-tinged fog, and their limbs begin to move with a purpose that is not their own. Welcome to the night shift of the damned. This is one of the most unsettling environmental storytelling elements in the Dragonborn DLC. When you first arrive on the island, you might notice people acting normally during the day. But if you wander near the Allmaker Stones at night, you witness a scene straight out of a horror movie. The locals, farmers, warriors, mages, are gathered around these monoliths, hammering, sawing, and chanting in unison. They are the sleepwalking builders of Miraak's empire. The brilliance of this scheme lies in its subtlety. Miraak didn't launch a noisy invasion. He didn't send Daedra to drag people out of their homes. He simply hijacked their sleep cycle. The bend will shout, amplified by the stones, acts like a radio signal that overrides the brain's shutdown command. Instead of a REM sleep, the victims enter a state of active trance. They pick up tools, hammers, chisels, whatever is at hand, and they march to the nearest construction site. Core in-game fact: if you try to talk to these people while they are working, they are unresponsive or dismissive. They recite the chant, "Here in his temple, that they have forgotten, here do we toil, that we might remember." They are literally rebuilding the infrastructure of the dragon cult brick by brick, while their conscious minds are locked away in a nightmare. Consider the physical toll this takes. Imagine working a full day in the ebony mines or hunting hawkers on the ice, only to spend your entire night hauling rocks for a dead priest. Then the sun rises, the green fog lifts, and you wake up in your bed, or worse, standing out in the cold, with no memory of what happened. You just feel exhausted. Your hands are blistered. Your back aches. The people of Solstheim are suffering from a mass epidemic of chronic fatigue, but they can't figure out why. They think it's just the ash, or the stress, or bad dreams. It is a violation of the highest order. Miraak is stealing the one thing that belongs solely to us, our rest. He is using their bodies as batteries to power his return. Let's zoom in on the specific victims. It's not just the nameless NPCs. We see prominent figures caught in this web. The Skarl, who are fiercely protective of the Allmaker and detest the adversary, are out there bowing to the Windstone. Even the haughty Dunmer of House Redoran are susceptible. It shows that Miraak's power doesn't care about your culture, your religion, or your level. If you have a pulse and you're on the island, you are a potential employee. There is a particularly tragic detail regarding the Skarl. They believe in the balance of nature. For them to be forced to corrupt their own sacred stones, to cover them in the architecture of the dragon cult, is a spiritual defilement. They are being used to destroy their own gods. And the worst part, they don't know they're doing it. They wake up praying to the Allmaker, unaware that 6 hours ago they were chanting praises to the First Dragonborn. Obscure lore tidbit. The construction isn't just random renovations. If you look closely at the structures they are building around the stones, they are shrines to Miraak. But they are also transmitters. The architecture acts as a focusing lens for the bend will shout. The more they build, the stronger the signal gets. It's a positive feedback loop. The builders are building the very cage that keeps them enslaved. The sheer architectural impossible nature of these structures, curved stone that defies gravity, similar to the style of Apocrypha, suggests that Miraak is beaming the blueprints directly into their brains. These simple miners and hunters suddenly know how to construct high-concept magical conduits. The community has long debated the nature of the dream the victims are experiencing. Are they trapped in a nightmare, or is it a blissful void? Some dialogue suggests that while under the influence they feel a sense of oneness and purpose. "He is the truth," they might mutter. This suggests Miraak isn't just controlling their limbs, he's flooding them with dopamine. He's making the slavery feel good, which is arguably more terrifying than pain. It suggests that if they were given the choice, some part of them might want to stay in the dream because the real world, with its ash storms and political decline, is too harsh. However, there is one notable exception to this mass enslavement: Master Neloth of House Telvanni. The old wizard seems immune, or at least resistant enough to stay inside his mushroom tower. This leads to a fan theory that high-level magical resistance, or perhaps just sheer, unadulterated arrogance, acts as a shield against the bend will shout. Neloth is too full of himself to let anyone else into his head. Miraak tries to bend his will, and Neloth's ego just bends it right back. But for everyone else, even the Dragonborn player character at the start of the DLC, the pull is irresistible. The horror of this section is the intimacy of the violation. We aren't talking about zombies who want to eat your brain. These are your neighbours, the blacksmith who fixes your armour, the merchant who sells you potions. By day, they are friends. By night, they are faceless drones. It creates a sense of paranoia. Who can you trust? If you fall asleep, will you wake up with a hammer? In your hand? And what exactly are they building toward? They are clearing the rubble from the Temple of Miraak. They are unearthing the entrance to his inner sanctum. Miraak is essentially crowdsourcing his own resurrection. He doesn't have a physical body in Solstheim yet, so he is using 1,000 pairs of mortal hands to pave the way for his arrival. It's the ultimate work-from-home scheme, where home is a dimension of tentacled madness. As the player, Walking through these construction sites at night is eerie. The rhythmic clank, clank, clank of the hammers echoes against the silent landscape. The green light from the stones bathes the workers in a sickly glow. If you try to stop them, they don't fight back. They just ignore you. They are locked in a loop. It makes you feel helpless. You can kill a dragon, but how do you fight a chant? How do you fight a compulsion that is rewritten into the very fabric of the community? This phase of Miraak's plan highlights his plan cruelty. He doesn't view these people as enemies to be defeated. He views them as resources. To him, the Dunmer and the Nords are no different from the stones they are quarrying. They are just raw materials. It devalues human life to a strictly utilitarian metric. As the night wears on and the moons begin to set, the signal fades. The workers drop their tools. They stumble back to their beds, eyes heavy, limbs leaden. They crawl under their furs, shivering, wondering why they feel so cold. And as the sun rises over the ash wastes, Solstheim wakes up to another day of normalcy, completely unaware that in the dark, they have been busy building the throne for their new god. You know the feeling. You've just spent 20 minutes waltzing around a jagged peak, dodging frost breath and putting arrows into a beast the size of a longhouse. The dragon crashes down, ploughing a trench through the snow. The music swells, that triumphant Nordic choir that makes you feel like you could punch a mountain. You step forward, ready for the payout. You're waiting for the skin to burn away, for that rush of wind and light to flow into your chest. You're waiting for the dragon soul-absorbed text to flash across your vision. But instead of the swoosh, you hear a sound like tearing parchment. The air shimmers, distorting the light, and a translucent orange-gold figure manifests standing on the dragon's corpse. It's him, Miraak, or rather, a spectral projection of him, beamed directly from the Library of Nightmares to rain on your parade. "I am growing stronger," he intones, his voice dripping with that specific kind of condescension usually reserved for cats looking at humans, and then he does the unthinkable. He inhales. The dragon's soul, your loot, your birthright, the thing you literally just risked your life for, bypasses you completely and flows into him. The dragon dissolves, and Miraak absorbs the energy, glowing brighter for a moment before fading away, leaving you standing there with an empty soul gem and a very real sense of indignation. This mechanic, the astral soul thief, is Miraak's most personal attack. Up until this point, his threat has been abstract. Cultists in masks, mind-controlled stones, but this is theft. He's reaching into your pocket and taking your wallet right after you did all the work. It establishes a rivalry that feels genuine. You don't just want to stop him because he's evil, you want to stop him because he owes you about 10 dragon souls. Let's look at the core in-game fact here. Once you complete the quest, the Temple of Miraak, there is a random chance, roughly 25% to start, increasing as you progress, that Miraak will show up every time you kill a dragon. It doesn't matter where you are. You could be in the wilds of Solstheim or back in the hold of Whiterun. His reach is global. This mechanic proves that his influence is no longer confined to the island. He has locked onto your specific magical signature. He is haunting you. But why is he doing this? Beyond simply being a jerk, there is a metaphysical necessity to it. We established earlier that Miraak has been stagnating in Apocrypha for thousands of years. While the realm sustains his life, it doesn't feed his dragon blood. The Dova soul craves power, specifically the power of its kin. To physically manifest in Mundus, to fully cross the threshold and stay there, he needs a massive battery charge. He needs to top off the tank. By stealing souls, he is accelerating his return. Every soul he eats is another chain broken. Every soul he takes from you is a soul you can't use to unlock. Shouts, it's a resource war. He is starving the opposition while gorging himself. It's a brilliant tactical move. If the last Dragonborn cannot learn new shouts, they cannot master the bend will shout needed to defeat him. He is trying to soft-lock your progression. There is a fascinating obscure lore implication here regarding the hierarchy of Dragonborns. Why can he take the soul when you're standing right there? Lore suggests that dragon souls are drawn to the strongest vessel. It's not a finder's keeper's rule, it's a magnetic pull. By overpowering your absorption, Miraak is asserting dominance. He is effectively saying, I am the larger gravity well, I am the alpha. It's a flex. He is proving that his soul, ancient and bloated with forbidden knowledge, is more dragon than yours. This leads to a popular community debate. Is Miraak actually present when this happens? The visual effect suggests a projection, an astral form. He isn't physically teleporting his body out of Apocrypha just to snack and leave. He's projecting his will, his ha, across the dimensions to scoop up the energy. It's similar to how a straw works. He's drinking your milkshake from another room. The dialogue he delivers during these thefts is also revealing. He mocks you. Did you think you could escape me? Thank you for your generosity. This dragon's soul belongs to me. He treats the player not as a rival, but as a harvester. To him, the last Dragonborn is just a glorified employee, running around Skyrim collecting souls so he doesn't have to. It reframes the entire game. You think you're the hero? No, you're just the intern doing the coffee run for the CEO. This constant harassment creates unique psychological pressure. In a typical RPG, rewards are guaranteed. You kill the boss, you get the loot. Miraak subverts this dopamine loop. He introduces uncertainty. You start to dread killing dragons because you don't want to feed the beast. You might even hesitate to land the killing blow, looking over your shoulder to see if the golden ghost is waiting. It turns the core power fantasy of Skyrim, slaying dragons, into a source of anxiety. Let's touch on the visual design of his spectral form. He appears semi-transparent, glowing with a golden-orange hue, distinct from the sickly green of Apocrypha. This gold colour is significant. In Elder Scrolls lore, gold is often associated with divinity, with Akatosh, and with dragon souls themselves. Despite his corruption by Hermaeus Mora, this form reminds us that he is still a child of Akatosh. The divine spark is still there, buried under the tentacles. It's a tragic reminder of what he could have been. A golden hero if he hadn't turned to the shadows. However, there is a darker interpretation. Some lore scholars suggest that Miraak isn't just stealing the soul for power, he is stealing it to prevent you from learning something specific. Dragons carry knowledge. By intercepting the soul, he intercepts the memories and the understanding of the voice that comes with it. He is censoring your education. He knows that if you learn too much, you might surpass him. The randomness of his appearance is also a stroke of genius. If it happened every time, it would just be a game mechanic. But because it's unpredictable, it feels personal. It feels like he's watching you, waiting for the moment you're most proud of yourself, just to slap you down. Oh, nice kill on that ancient dragon. Yoink. And consider the sheer magical capability required to do this. He's projecting an avatar across the barriers of reality, instantly detecting the death of a dragon and creating a magical vacuum strong enough to outpull another Dragonborn. This requires a level of sensory awareness that is godlike. He basically has a dragon death notification push alert set up on his mind. This section highlights the parasitical nature of Miraak's relationship with the player. He feeds off your success. The stronger you get, the more appetizing you are to him. It's a symbiotic relationship where one party is a tick and the other is the dog. But unlike a tick, this one talks trash while it's draining your blood. As the soul fades into his spectral form and he vanishes back to Apocrypha, the silence returns to the mountaintop. You are left with a dragon skeleton and a sense of violation. But there is a silver lining. Every time he steals a soul, he confirms that you are a threat. He wouldn't bother if you were insignificant. He is intervening because he is worried. He is trying to slow you down because he hears your footsteps approaching his temple. The theft of the souls is the final insult that solidifies the player's resolve. You stop fighting him because you have to save the world. You start fighting him because you want your stuff back. And as he fades away, laughing, you realize that the only way to stop the theft is to go to the source. You have to go to Apocrypha and make him spit it all out. The path to stopping the First Dragonborn does not lead through the clouds, but underground, into the bowels of the earth where history has been left to rot. We are entering the Temple of Miraak. If you've played the Dragonborn DLC, you know this isn't your standard Nordic ruin. It's not just another Bleak Falls barrow where you knock over a few urns and fight a spider. This place is a monument to obsession, a sprawling subterranean city that has been sealed since the Merethic Era, festering in the dark. When you breach the heavy doors and step out of the ash storm into the stale, frigid air of the temple, the first thing that hits you is the silence. It's a heavy, expectant silence. But as you descend, you realise you're walking through a graveyard of traitors. The enemies you encounter here, the Draugr, are not the typical ancient Nords who were buried with honour to guard their ancestors. These are the remains of Miraak's original cult. These are the men and women who stood on the walls during the Great Rebellion, who cheered as he devoured dragon souls. They died in the siege led by Varlock, and they were left where they fell, or dragged into the crypts to serve in death. Core in-game fact: as you push deeper into the temple, accompanied by Freya of the Scarl, you find scenes of gruesome sacrifice. The floors are littered with skeletons in cages, some hanging over pits. This suggests that the final days of the siege were a time of desperation and madness, but the most telling detail is the Draugr themselves. In the deeper levels, they aren't just wandering aimlessly, they're manning the defences, they operate the traps, they stand in formation. Even after 4,000 years, the discipline of Miraak's army holds. They are waiting for the order to march back to the surface. The architecture of the temple tells a story of corruption. In the upper levels, it looks like traditional Nordic stonework, heavy arches, carved pillars, the familiar snake and whale motifs. But as you go deeper, the geometry begins to slip. You start to see the influence of Hermaeus Mora bleeding into reality. The stone looks slick, almost wet. Roots that shouldn't exist in the frozen earth coil around the pillars. Green lanterns cast long, unnatural shadows. It is a visual representation of Miraak's soul. Nord on the outside, eldritch horror on the inside. Let's talk about the traps. Nordic ruins are famous for their swinging axes and pressure plates, usually designed to keep grave robbers out. But the Temple of Miraak feels designed to keep something in. Or perhaps it is designed as a meat grinder to generate souls. There is a prevalent fan theory that the entire temple functions as a giant necromantic engine. The theory posits that the death and suffering that occurred here during the siege and the subsequent deaths of adventurers who wandered in feed the magical barrier that protects Miraak's sanctum. The temple isn't just a building, it's a stomach. One of the most disturbing aspects of this dungeon is the presence of the modern cultists. We see the masked zealots we met earlier, but here they are often found dead, killed by the Draugr. This is a fascinating bit of environmental storytelling. It implies that Miraak's ancient undead followers do not recognise his new living followers. To the Draugr, these newcomers are intruders. It creates a chaotic three-way war in the corridors: the player, the delusional modern cultists, and the ancient undead guard. It highlights the disconnect in Miraak's forces. He uses people and discards them. The old toys are killing the new toys, and he doesn't care enough to tell them to stop. Midway through the temple, you encounter a word wall, but this isn't a typical wall guarding a generic shout. This wall teaches you a word of dragon aspect, mal, strength. This is a massive lore reveal. Dragon aspect is a shout that allows the user to take on the spectral form of a dragon, gaining immense power. The fact that this word is hidden deep within Miraak's own temple suggests that he wrote it. He didn't just learn shouts, he authored them. This wall is his manifesto. He was trying to become a dragon in truth, to armour himself in the concept of the Dova. Finding this here is like finding the villain's personal diary, and the entry just says, "I will be a god," in capital letters. An obscure lore tidbit found in the game files and developer commentary suggests that the Temple of Miraak was originally intended to be even larger, a true subterranean city that rivaled Labyrinthian. While the game scales it down, the implication remains: this was the capital of his rebellion. It had living quarters, smithies, dining halls. It was a bunker for the end of the world. Walking through the empty, silent halls, you can almost hear the echoes of the cultists chanting, the clash of steel as Varlock's forces breached the gates, and the final, desperate scream as the temple was sealed. The horror of the temple peaks in the sanctum. Here, the influence of Apocrypha is undeniable. The walls are no longer stone, they are comprised of stacked books and writhing black tentacles. The floor is covered in the acidic ink of Mora's realm. You're physically crossing the threshold between Nirn and Oblivion. The air is thick with the sound of whispering, thousands of voices overlapping, reading forbidden texts. It is here that you realise the true purpose of the temple. It is an anchor. Miraak has been using this location to tether his realm to Solstheim. The temple is the physical wound in the world through which the infection enters. The Draugr, the traps, the cultists, They are just the antibodies protecting the infection site. As you reach the final chamber, you find the Black Book, Waking Dreams, on a pedestal. It doesn't look like a holy artifact. It looks like a trap. And it is, but it's a trap you have to spring. The temple was never the destination. It was just the waiting room. The real confrontation isn't with the dead things in the hallway, but with the living nightmare inside the book. The Temple of Miraak stands as a grim reminder of the cost of his ambition. It is a place where thousands died for a lie, and where their bodies were denied the peace of Aetherius, forced to shuffle through the dark for millennia, guarding an empty throne. It is a tomb for the concept of loyalty, and as you stand over the Black Book, preparing to touch the page, you can feel the weight of all that history pressing down on you, daring you to open the door and see the master of the house. The pages of the Black Book flutter shut behind you, and the sensation of falling returns. But this time you don't land on the stone floor of a temple. You land on the twisted, shifting platforms of Apocrypha's inner sanctum. The air here is so thick with magic you can almost taste the metal on your tongue. And circling overhead, silhouetted against the bruised green sky, is a creature that represents the pinnacle of Miraak's cruelty. The serpentine dragon, Sarotar. In any other context, a dragon is a boss fight. It is fire and fury, a creature that demands respect even as it tries to barbecue you. But here, in the shadow of the First Dragonborn, a dragon is something else entirely. It is a taxi. We have arrived at the moment where the gameplay mechanic of dragon riding reveals its dark narrative underbelly. To reach Miraak's summit, you cannot walk. The bridges are broken, the distance is too great. You need wings, but wings in Apocrypha are not given freely, they are taken. You step out onto the platform. Sarotar descends, his scales glistening with the oily sheen of the realm. He lands with a heavy thud, roaring a challenge. He is majestic, terrifying, and ready to kill. And then, you do what Miraak taught you. You open your mouth and shout, "Ghoul." Dove. The effect is immediate and visceral. The blue energy of the shout hits the dragon, and the great beast doesn't just flinch. He breaks. His head lowers. The fire in his throat dies out, replaced by a confused, submissive whimper. The aggression evaporates, leaving behind a creature that looks suddenly, painfully old. "Hail, Thury," he rumbles. "Your Thuum is mastery." Thury. Overlord. It is a word of absolute submission. This is the tragedy of Sarotar. His name in the dragon tongue breaks down to Sarotus the Mighty, and servant. Mighty servant. It is a name that suggests he was perhaps bred or destined for this role, or perhaps Miraak renamed him after breaking him, branding him with his station. Unlike the dragons of Skyrim who serve Alduin out of a sense of cosmic hierarchy, Sarotar serves because his free will has been chemically excised by the voice. Let's look at the core in-game fact. Sarotar is unique in appearance. He is a serpentine dragon, lacking the front limbs of his mainland cousins, giving him a more snake-like sinuous movement. This design choice by the developers perfectly fits the setting. He looks like he belongs in the ink. He looks like he has evolved, or devolved, to survive in this toxic environment. He's a product of Apocrypha as much as he's a product of Akatosh. Climbing onto his neck is a moment of cognitive dissonance for the player. On one hand, it's undeniably cool. You're flying a dragon. On the other hand, you are participating in Miraak's system. You are using his tools, his methods. As Sarotar takes flight, lurching into the green void, he speaks to you not as an enemy, but as a resigned tour guide. He tells you that Miraak awaits. He sounds tired. This enslavement is the ultimate insult to dragonkind. Dragons are beings of domination. To be ridden like a horse is a metaphysical inversion of their nature. It is humiliating, and Miraak knows this. He keeps Sarotar and other dragons in Apocrypha not just for transport but as trophies. Every time he mounts Sarotar, he is reenacting his victory over the dragon race. He is saying, "I am greater than the gods who made you." There is an obscure lore implication regarding the mental state of dragons under bend will. Do they know they are enslaved? The dialogue suggests a dreamlike state. "I feel different," they might say. But Sarotar seems lucid, yet powerless to stop himself. He compliments your power. He seems almost eager to please. This suggests that the shout doesn't just control the body. It rewires the pleasure centers of the dragon's brain. It makes servitude feel like the correct natural order. It is a complete rewriting of the dragon's internal philosophy. Community debates often centre on whether Sarotar is a willing collaborator who betrayed his kin, or the first victim of Miraak's fully realised shout. Given his name, the latter seems more likely. He's the patient zero of dragon slavery. He has likely been ferrying Miraak around this realm for thousands of years, carrying the man who eats his brothers. As you fly through the twisting towers of books, Sarotar engages in combat for you. He breathes frost and fire at the seekers and lurkers on the bridges. He fights his own jailers to help you reach the warden. The irony is palpable. The mighty servant is clearing the path for the one person who might kill his master, yet he fights to protect that master's interests until the very end. The flight to the summit is a visual spectacle. You see the sheer scale of Miraak's domain. The stacks of books go on forever. The ink ocean is bottomless, and you, a tiny mortal on the back of a massive dragon, are just a speck in the green expanse. It emphasises the isolation. Sarotar is the only other living thing here that speaks the language of the Dova. He is Miraak's only companion, and Miraak treats him like a rental car. In the lore of the Elder Scrolls, just the bond between a rider and a mount is usually one of trust or breaking, but this is neither. This is puppetry. You can feel the dragon's muscles bunching under you, the immense power in his wings, and you know that all of it is being held in check by 3 words shouted into the ether. When Sarotar finally lands at the summit of Apocrypha, dropping you off at the foot of Miraak's altar, he doesn't fly away to freedom. He lands and waits. He waits to see who will win. He waits to see who his new master will be. He has forgotten how to be free. He only knows how to be the mighty servant. This interaction sets the stage for the final confrontation. It shows you exactly what Miraak plans to do to all of Tamriel. He doesn't want to destroy the world. He wants to turn every living thing into a Sarotar, powerful, useful, and utterly broken. As you step off the dragon's back and draw your weapon, you aren't just fighting for your life. You're fighting to ensure that no one else ever has to make that submissive whimper again. You step off the neck of Sarotar, your boots finding purchase on a surface that feels less like stone and more like compressed fossilized paper. You have arrived. This is the summit of Apocrypha. In the game, this is the final boss arena, the designated circle for the duel. But in the lore, this place is architectural impossibility, a sanctuary carved out of madness by the sheer force of one man's ego. To understand the summit, you have to throw out your understanding of physics. We are no longer in Mundus. Gravity here is a suggestion, not a law. The platform you stand on floats in a void of swirling green mist. Looking over the edge, you don't see the ground. You see infinite strata of books, spiralling down into the darkness like the rings of a tree that has been growing since the dawn of time. The geometry of the summit is, to put it mildly, non-Euclidean. If you look at the arches and pillars that surround the central dais, they seem to twist in ways that hurt the eyes. Yes, a pillar might look straight from one angle, but if you turn your head, it appears to loop back on itself. This is a staple of H.P. Lovecraft's influence on the DLC design. The environment is designed to make you feel small, confused, and nauseous. It is a hostile architecture. Center stage stands Miraak. He isn't pacing, he isn't hiding. He is standing perfectly still at the center of a great seal carved into the floor, his back to the void, facing you. This is his throne room, his prison cell, and his gym all rolled into one. He has likely stood in this exact spot for centuries, staring into the green abyss, waiting for a challenger worthy of his time. Let's look at a core in-game fact. The ground you're walking on is literally made of books. If you look down at the textures in the game, you can see the spines, the pages, the leather bindings. The entire structure is built from the discarded knowledge of the universe. It reinforces the idea that in Apocrypha, knowledge is the only matter that exists. Miraak is standing on a foundation of forbidden secrets. It's a literal interpretation of the phrase, knowledge is power. He has weaponized the library. Surrounding the central combat area are tall, twisting stacks of books that serve as pillars. But they also serve a tactical purpose. In the fight, Miraak will use them for cover, teleporting between them. In the narrative sense, these pillars act as conduits. They channel the magicka of the realm into the center. The summit is essentially a giant magical battery, and Miraak is the filament. The atmosphere here is oppressive. The air is static, dry, and smells of old dust and ozone. There is no wind, yet the pages of the open book scattered around flutter violently. This is the breath of Hermaeus Mora. The Prince of Fate is everywhere here. The sky above is a shifting mosaic of eyes and tentacles watching the stage. You get the distinct feeling that you're inside a snow globe and someone is shaking. There is an obscure lore tidbit regarding the word wall found at the summit. It is one of the few word walls in the game that is not ancient Nordic stone. It appears to be grown from the realm itself. It teaches the final word of dragon aspect. The implication is that Miraak didn't find this word. He forced the realm to manifest it. He wrung the secret out of the fabric of Apocrypha. The wall stands as a testament to his mastery over his environment. He didn't just survive here, he terraformed it. A popular fan theory posits that the summit is the only stable place in Apocrypha, because Miraak's will is holding it together. The rest of the realm is chaotic, shifting, dangerous. But the summit is ordered. It has a floor, a centre, a perimeter. It reflects Miraak's mind. Rigid, orderly, and focused. If he were to die, the theory suggests the summit would dissolve back into the ink. He is the load-bearing wall of this entire structure. The silence at the summit is heavier than anywhere else. Below you could hear the seekers in the ocean. Here, there is only the sound of your own heartbeat and the low hum of the black book that brought you here. It is the silence of a duel at high noon. Miraak's positioning is also significant. He stands near the centre, but slightly back, near the altar where the black book Waking Dreams rests. This book is his lifeline and his leash. He cannot go too far from it. It represents the pact he made. He is the guardian of the book, and the book is the guardian of him. As you approach, the visual storytelling is striking. You are the last Dragonborn, clad in whatever armour you crafted, Daedric, dragon plate, iron. He is the first, clad in the robes of the cult and the mask of the priest. It is a mirror image. You are looking at a version of yourself that took a wrong turn 4,000 years ago. The summit acts as the reflective surface. This arena is designed for a spectacle. It is wide, open, with no place to hide. It forces a confrontation. In other dungeons, you can sneak, you can snipe. Here, the game forces you to stand and deliver. Miraak wants an audience. He wants Hermaeus Mora to see him crush you. He wants the dragons circling overhead to witness his supremacy. The terrifying aspect of the summit is not just the weird shapes or the book flaws, it's the realization of how small it is. This is Miraak's entire world. For millennia, his existence has been confined to this platform. He has walked these few hundred feet of paper 1,000,000 times. It is a claustrophobic hell disguised as an open sky. As you draw your weapon, the green light flaring off the pools of ink around the edge of the arena casts long, distorted shadows. The eyes in the sky blink. The stage is set. The actors are in position. The summit of Apocrypha waits for blood to spill on its pages, and you realise that only one Dragonborn is going to walk back to the book. The duel begins not with the clash of steel, but with a collision of voices that shakes the foundations of the library. You shout, "Fus." He shouts, "Fus." The air between you compresses and explodes, sending shockwaves rippling through the stacks of books. This is it. The dogfight of the Dragonborns. Miraak is a terrifying opponent. He doesn't just use fireballs, he uses the voice with a fluidity that makes the Greybeards look like novices. He weaves shouts into his melee attacks, staggering you with a cyclone's shout before lashing out with his tentacle sword. He coats the ground in poison. He teleports. He is fighting with the desperation of a man who has been rehearsing this moment for 4,000 years. But you are the last Dragonborn. You have slain Alduin. You have walked the soul cairn. You are not a pushover. Slowly, methodically, you begin to wear him down. You land a heavy blow that cracks his magical wards. You slice through his robes. He stumbles. His health bar drops to critical. In any other boss fight, this is the moment the music swells, the enemy gives a final speech and falls. But Miraak is not done. He has brought insurance. He turns his masked face away from you, looking toward the perimeter of the arena where his dragon allies are circling or perched. Kruzikrel, Relonikiv, Sarotar. These beasts have served him faithfully. They have guarded his temple, carried him through the void, and intimidated his enemies. They are his loyal lieutenants. And then, He shouts 4 words that chill the blood, Zilosdidu. Roughly translated, your soul is mine to devour. This is not a request. It is a command that overrides the laws of biology. Cruzikrell, the first victim, doesn't even get a chance to scream. His body stiffens on his perch. His eyes go wide with a sudden horrific realization of betrayal. Then, his flesh simply unzips. The scales dissolve into ash. The muscle melts away. In an instant, a living, breathing dragon is reduced to a skeleton, and its soul, that golden, swirling essence of divinity, is ripped violently from its ribcage. The soul streams across the arena and slams into Miraak. The effect is instantaneous. Miraak's wounds knit together. His magicka reserves refill. He glows with the stolen vitality of his servant. He stands up, fully healed, dusting off his robes as if the last 10 minutes of combat never happened. A minor setback, he sneers. This mechanic, the mid-combat full heal, is infuriating for a player. I just depleted his health bar. Why is it full again? But narratively, it is a masterclass in villainy. It demonstrates Miraak's absolute narcissism. He does not view these dragons as allies. He views them as health potions. He views them as extra batteries he brought along in his backpack. Think about the psychological impact on the other dragons. Sarotar is watching this. He sees his brother, Cruzikrell, liquidated to patch up a cut on Miraak's arm. Does he feel fear? Does the bend will shout suppress even the instinct of self-preservation? It's a horror show. They are waiting in line for the slaughterhouse, and the butcher is the man they call Thuri. The fight resumes. You grind him down again. It takes everything you have. You shout, you slash, you chug potions. He stumbles again, and again he turns. Zil Losti Du. Relonikiv dies next. Same process. The betrayal is repeated. Miraak is now fighting on the lives of others. He is effectively immortal as long as he has friends to eat. It creates a sickening rhythm to the battle. You aren't just fighting 1 health bar, you are fighting 4. And finally, it is Sarotar's turn. The dragon who flew you here. The mighty servant. He lands, perhaps thinking he is joining the fight to help his master. But Miraak looks at him with the same cold indifference he showed the others. Sarotar, are you so easily swayed? Miraak taunts, though in this context he is likely mocking the dragon's service to you or perhaps justifying the consumption. He devours Sarotar. The beast that carried you through the green skies, the creature that submitted to your voice, is erased. Miraak absorbs the final soul. This act is the peak of his cruelty. It proves that there is no us in Miraak's world. There is only me. He is willing to burn everything and everyone to achieve his goal. He would consume the entire world if it meant he could stand on top of the ashes. Core in-game fact. This mechanic makes the fight a battle of attrition. You cannot stop him from healing. You simply have to outlast his supply of dragons. It turns the fight into a grim countdown. 3 dragons, 3 heals. You have to kill him 4 times to make it stick. Lore-wise, this ability to consume a soul instantly at a distance to heal physical damage is a perversion of the Dragonborn's natural ability. Usually, absorbing a soul grants knowledge. Miraak is burning the knowledge for fuel. He is taking something eternal, a dragon's soul, and using it for a temporary tactical advantage. It is wasteful. It is desperate. As the skeleton of Sarotar crashes to the platform, scattering books and dust, Miraak stands fully rejuvenated for the 3rd time. But he is alone now. The skies are empty. The insurance policy is cashed out. He has literally consumed his own army. This is the moment the dynamic shifts. Miraak is powerful, yes, but he has stripped away his defences. He has no more shields, no more mounts, no more batteries. He is just a man in a mask standing on a pile of bones. The cruelty of this section serves to strip away any lingering sympathy you might have had for him. He isn't a tragic fallen hero anymore. He is a parasite. He eats his enemies, he eats his friends, he eats the land. And as you ready your weapon for the final round, you realise that if you lose, you won't just die. You will be the final course in his feast. He raises his sword, the tentacles writhing in anticipation. This is it, Dragonborn, he might as well be saying. No more safety nets, just you and me. But the Green Prince is watching, and Hermaeus Mora has noticed that his champion is running out of pawns. The arena is silent, save for the heavy breathing of 2 exhausted Dragonborns. The bones of Sarotar, Cruzia Krell and Relonikiv lie scattered like discarded toys, their marrow sucked dry to fuel a war they never chose. Miraak stands at the centre of the dais, his robes tattered, his mask chipped, his magicka flickering like a dying candle. He has eaten his army. He has shouted until his throat is raw, and still you stand. He prepares for one final gambit. In the game mechanics, this is usually where he tries to teleport to the centre pool, perhaps to turn ethereal, perhaps to try and draw strength from the realm itself one last time. He's looking for a back door. He's the first Dragonborn. Surely he has an exit strategy. He has spent 4,000 years planning this escape. He cannot be checkmated by a mute adventurer with an iron helmet. But as he steps toward the centre, the liquid ink of the pool begins to bubble. It is not the gentle ripple of a spell, it is the churning of a leviathan waking up. "Did you think you could escape me, Miraak?" The voice is everywhere. It vibrates in your teeth. It is the slow, drawling, agonizingly deliberate voice of Hermaeus Mora. It sounds like boulders grinding together underwater. Miraak freezes. For the first time in the entire chronicle, the arrogance vanishes. His body language shifts from defiance to pure primal terror. He knows that voice. He has heard it whispering in the dark for millennia, but he has never heard it this loud. He looks down at the ink, and then he looks up at you. And in that split second, he realizes the truth that Varlock the jailer tried to teach him ages ago. You cannot shout your way out of a deal with the devil. "You can hide nothing from me here," Mora continues, "no matter how you squirm." And then, the execution happens. It is swift, brutal, and devoid of dignity. A massive, spined tentacle erupts from the central pool. It doesn't strike him in battle, it skewers him. It lifts him off his feet like a rag doll. The first Dragonborn, the rival of dragons, the splitter of continents, is impaled on a fleshy spike of knowing. This is a core in-game fact that defines the ending of the Dragonborn DLC. You do not strike the killing blow, you do not get the satisfaction of the final execution animation. Hermaeus Mora steals the kill. Just as Miraak stole your dragon souls, Mora steals your victory. It is a cosmic irony. The thief gets robbed. Miraak hangs there, suspended in the green mist. He struggles, coughing up blood, or perhaps ink. The green energy of the realm begins to drain out of him. Mora is liquidating his assets. "I can see you are finished," Mora drones. No wonder. You have grown weak. The cruelty of that statement is breathtaking. Miraak is not weak. He just fought the last Dragonborn to a standstill. He is arguably one of the most powerful mortals to ever exist. But to a Daedric prince, power is relative. Mora is bored. He is like a child who has played with an action figure until the arm fell off, and now he is tossing it into the trash because he sees a shiny new one standing right there. That new action figure is you. Miraak's final moments are a mix of defiance and resignation. As the life leaves him, he speaks his last words, and they are not an apology, they are a curse. "May he be rewarded for his service as I am." This line is chilling. He is looking at you, the player, the new champion, and he is giving you a prophecy. He is saying, "Look at me. This is your future. This is what a retirement plan looks like when you work for Hermaeus Mora." It is a warning. He is telling you that the cycle is not broken, it is just resetting. You are the new Miraak. As he dies, his physical form disintegrates. He doesn't leave behind a corpse. He dissolves into a skeleton and then into dust, his essence returning to the ink. But then, the final transfer begins. The soul of the first Dragonborn, a soul that has been marinating in forbidden knowledge since the Merethic Era, a soul that contains the power of dozens of consumed dragons, flows into you. This is the biggest payout in the game. It's not just one soul, it's a bank vault opening. In the game mechanics, you receive roughly 10 dragon souls, plus the ones he stole from you, and you gain the ability to reset your perk trees. But lore-wise, this is a terrifying amount of power. You're absorbing the memories, the shouts, and the sheer will of the man who invented the concept of rebellion. Think about the obscure lore implications of this absorption. When a Dragonborn absorbs a dragon, they absorb its understanding. By absorbing Miraak, do you absorb his madness? Do you absorb his 4,000 years of boredom? There is a fan theory that the last Dragonborn eventually disappears from history, as heroes often do in Elder Scrolls lore, because they essentially become the new guardian of Apocrypha trapped by the same knowledge that trapped Miraak. The reward Miraak spoke of is the job itself. Hermaeus Mora turns his attention to you. The giant eye in the sky dilates. The new Dragonborn serves me now, he says. You will serve me well. He doesn't ask. He states. He assumes that because you killed his old champion, you have accepted the vacancy. You didn't sign a contract, you didn't read a black book to ask for power, but by engaging with his realm, you are now part of his collection. You are the shiny new addition on the shelf. This betrayal highlights the absolute amorality of the Daedra. Mora isn't evil in the chaotic sense of Mehrunes Dagon. He is transactional. Miraak was a tool that broke. You are a tool that works. It's simple efficiency. He feels no loyalty to Miraak despite the millennia of service. To Mora, 4,000 years is a blink of an eye, and a mortal life is just a page of text to be read and turned. The tragedy of Miraak is that he thought he was a player in the game. He thought he was using Mora to get back to Solstheim. But he was never a player, he was an NPC. He was content to be generated by the realm for a specific purpose, and when that purpose was fulfilled, testing you, he was deleted. The summit falls silent. The tentacles retract. The green mist swirls lazily. You are left standing alone on the book platform, glowing with the energy of 1,000 dead dragons, with the skeleton of your predecessor at your feet. The battle of the summit is over. The villain is dead. But as you look at the black book waiting to take you home, you have to wonder, did you win? Or did you just pass the interview? Miraak's rebellion ends not with a bang, but with a bureaucratic replacement. He wanted to be a god, but he died a servant, impaled, drained and discarded. It is a pathetic end for a man who shouted apart a continent. But in the realm of Apocrypha, there are no heroes and villains, there are only librarians and books, and Miraak just got checked out. The dust settles on the summit of Apocrypha. The green mist continues to swirl, indifferent to the change in management, but the oppressive weight of Miraak's presence is gone. You stand over the skeletal remains of the First Dragonborn, and as the adrenaline fades, the primal instinct of the adventurer kicks in. You reach down to claim the spoils of war. It's a grim ritual, stripping the dead, but in this case it feels less like looting and more like an archaeological excavation. You're picking up the pieces of a broken myth. Let's examine the legacy he leaves behind, starting with the most iconic piece, the Mask of Miraak. When you lift it from the bones, you realize it is not made of the same heavy metal as the other Dragon Priest masks. It feels organic, almost warm to the touch. The design, a golden bearded visage warped into a tentacled seeker-like frown, tells the entire story of his corruption. A core in-game fact is that this mask, depending on your armor skill, can be either heavy or light armor, and it provides a massive boost to magicka. This stat block reflects his nature perfectly. He wasn't a tank like the ebony-clad warriors of the Fourth Era. He was a spell sword, a creature of pure magical dominance. Wearing his mask is uncomfortable. It implies seeing the world through his eyes that spent thousands of years staring into the abyss. It is a symbol of authority, yes, but it is also a muzzle. It marks the wearer as property of the library. Then there are his weapons. The Sword of Miraak is arguably one of the most disturbing items in the game. It isn't just a sword, it is a severed tentacle that stiffens into a blade when swung. When you strike with it, it extends, lashing out like a whip. It drains stamina, exhausting your enemies. This weapon encapsulates his philosophy. Combat is not about honor, it is about draining the will of your opponent until they cannot fight back. It is a weapon of attrition, and the staff, it sprays. Walls of writhing tentacles on the ground, poisoning and slowing anyone foolish enough to walk through them. These aren't the weapons of a Nord hero, they are the tools of a dungeon master who cheats. But beyond the gear, the true legacy of Miraak is the shadow he casts over the history of the Dragonborn. He is the Dark Mirror. He represents the bad ending of the Dragonborn prophecy. We are told that we are heroes, chosen by Akatosh to save the world. Miraak proves that the Chosen One status is not a guarantee of morality. It is just a power set. Akatosh gave the soul, but Mora gave the education, and the result was a monster. There is a prevalent fan theory that the last Dragonborn is doomed to repeat Miraak's cycle. Think about it. You're now the strongest being in existence. You have absorbed Miraak's power. You have the favour of Hermaeus Mora, whether you want it or not. You have no peers. The theory suggests that eventually the last Dragonborn will also grow bored. You will grow tired of the petty politics of the Empire and the Stormcloaks. You will seek greater challenges, greater knowledge. And where does all forbidden knowledge eventually lead? Back to the Black Books. Back to Apocrypha. Miraak's final curse, may he be rewarded for his service as I am, might not be spite, it might be a spoiler. Consider the what-if scenario. This is the obscure lore tragedy that hurts the most. If Miraak had not turned traitor, if he had used his power to lead the rebellion alongside Hakon and Gormley, the Dragon War would have been a short skirmish. The Nords wouldn't have needed to use an Elder Scroll to cast Alduin through time. The entire Fourth Era crisis, the return of the World Eater, the destruction of Helgen, all of it might have been avoided. Miraak had the power to fix the timeline 4,000 years ago, but he was too busy fixing his own career. His selfishness literally doomed future generations to centuries of war. As you turn, away from the skeleton, you look back at the Black Book, Waking Dreams. It is open, the pages fluttering in the phantom wind. It is your exit ticket. Reading it will transport you back to the familiar ash-covered reality of Solstheim. But you are leaving something behind. You are leaving the threat. The Bendwill stones on the island will go dormant. The sleepwalkers will wake up in their beds, confused, nursing headaches and sore muscles, with only fading memories of a green nightmare. The Temple of Miraak will remain a ruin, a tomb for a god who never quite made it. The people of Solstheim, the Skarl, the Redoran Guard, the simple farmers, will never truly know how close they came to permanent enslavement. They will know that the traitor returned and was defeated, but they won't understand the cosmic scale of the bullet they just dodged. They will go back to their lives, worrying about ash spawn and netch jelly prices, unaware that for a brief moment, their entire island was the staging ground for an invasion from oblivion. But you will know, you will carry the weight of that knowledge, you will carry the shouts that strip free will from the earth, you will carry the soul of the First. Miraak's story is a cautionary tale about the corrosive nature of ambition. He wanted to be the master of his own fate, but he ended up as a footnote in someone else's book. He wanted to ride above the world, but he died in the basement of the universe. He serves as a reminder that in the Elder Scrolls, there is always a bigger fish. You can eat dragons, you can shout down mountains, but if you sign the wrong contract, you're just another asset on a spreadsheet. As you place your hand on the book to leave, the green light washes over you one last time. The image of the summit, the spiralling towers, the ink sea, the empty throne, burns into your memory. It is a lonely, terrible place. A place where a man spent an eternity waiting for a fight he was destined to lose. The realm of Apocrypha fades. The smell of ozone and old paper is replaced by the smell of sulphur and sea salt. The cold, crisp air of Solstheim hits your face. You are back. The ground beneath your boots is solid rock, not compressed fiction. The sky is grey, not green. You are free. But as you walk away from the temple, perhaps you check your inventory. You touch the mask. You feel the hum of the sword, and you wonder, just for a second, if you're carrying the loot, or if the loot is carrying you. The first Dragonborn is dead. Long live the last Dragonborn, but in the eyes of Hermaeus Mora, they are just chapters in the same endless volume. And so, the book closes on the tragedy of Miraak. The ink dries, the pages settle, and the great library of Apocrypha fades back into the mists of your mind. We leave the green skies and the twisting towers behind us now. We leave the heavy silence of the summit and the cold winds of Solstheim. Let that intensity dissolve. Feel the tension in your shoulders loosen, dropping away like heavy armour you no longer need to wear. The shout in your throat softens into a slow, steady breath. In and out. There are no dragons circling your ceiling tonight. There are no seekers watching from the shadows. There is only the quiet safety of your own space. The screen goes dark. The story is told. The first Dragonborn has found his rest, however dark it may be, and now it is time for you to find yours. Let the world of Nirn spin on without you for a few hours. The quests will be there tomorrow. The loot will wait. For now, the only thing you need to conquer is the pillow beneath your head. Let the darkness of the room wrap around you, not as a trap, but as a warm, heavy blanket. Sink into it. Let your thoughts drift away like pages caught in a gentle breeze, floating down, down, down into the deep, dreamless ink of sleep. You are safe, you are warm, and the journey is done. Sweet dreams.